And really good to be with everyone this morning. I can see quite a few familiar faces, some friends, members I've met along the way, and some colleagues in ministry as well. And the I miss everything about Victoria except the lockdown. So one day we'll be back when the borders reopen and we might be able to catch up in person. I did spend most of my ministry years in Victoria. I spent a little bit of time with Pastor Lauren Pratt back in the day at North Point Church, a few years out in Gippsland. Hello from North Point, a few years in Gippsland at Traralgon and Moe. We had a wonderful time there as well, a few years with Gateway Church. And then I also had a few years at the Union in personal ministries and Sabbath school, as well as some work with radio and Faith FM in that area. But good to be able to spend some time this morning reflecting on the role, the concept, the mission of elders. Now, I've put something in the chat and I'm going to share my screen as well. So you won't be able to see too much of me, but probably more of my screen over the next little bit. Let's see if I can put that on full screen. There we go. I can still see some of you on my screen. Let's minimize that. Can you all see my screen? I'm just assuming you're nodding your heads and saying yes.
Yeah.
Great.
Yes.
Now, for those that are able to, and don't stress if you're not able to, but if you can go to the website menti.com, MENTI.com, and then enter that code there. Now, as much as I love hearing the sound of my own voice, I've probably heard it enough over the years. And instead of just simply doing all the sharing, I'd love for us to be able to participate, to engage a little bit as well. And so if you're able to go to that website there, MENTI.com. Now you can do this on a mobile device. You can do this on another browser, on your computer, on an iPad, on the device you're currently using, or on any other device. MENTI.com. And the code there is 87 70 26 and 7. So that's 8770267. And when you get there, just press the little love heart there. That way I know we have some people on there. So we've got 7 people, 11, 15, fantastic. Now, if you're struggling to get through, don't stress. The code will be up on the screen at the top of the slide there. Whenever you can get in, you can begin participating at any time. So that way it allows us to keep going. If you do disconnect or drop out for any reason, you can always come back in as we participate and engage in this as well. So we've got 25 people on there. We're going to start, and I'd love to get to know a little bit about you before we start talking about elders. So just the first question to get used to what we're doing here. It says, what church are you from? Now that should have taken you to the next slide on whatever device you're in, and just enter the name there, whatever church you're from, and it gives us a little bit of context of where people are coming from. Fantastic to see some from Montana. We attended there when we were at the Union last. Leongatha have been there as well. Mount Albert, Casey, Mernda, Geelong. It's fantastic to see so much variety from so many places throughout Victoria as well. Excellent from the Romanian church. I saw Elia there earlier. Again, some familiar faces. So fantastic. We've got 30 people that have joined in and responded to that, and welcome to you wherever you're coming from. We're going to start looking at the concept of elders this morning, explore what it means. But before we look at some things from the Bible and Spirit of Prophecy, I'd love to get a little bit of interaction from each of you as to what comes to mind when you think of the term elder. Now, again, if you're just joining in and you haven't connected to menti.com, the website is up on the screen and the code there as well. When you hear the word elder in a local church context, what comes to mind? A word, a sentence, what are some of the things? Service, overseer, leader, carer, an example. Someone who connects, someone who mentors, a shepherd. Someone with experience, yep, someone who empowers, someone with wisdom, a godly example setter. And I'm reading some of these out for those who either aren't able to see the screen or haven't connected yet. Someone who's responsible, a role model. These are all fantastic words that describe the function, the ministry of a church elder. So really good that you're able to engage, and thank you for sharing some of these things. Someone who's prayerful, someone who connects others, a spiritual leader, someone who's visionary, compassionate. And isn't it great that as you think of being an elder, you look in the mirror and you say, I am all of these things, right? Probably Jesus is the only one that really meets all of these, and most of us hope to be able to be competent and skilled in some of these areas, but these are all important and valuable aspects of being an elder. Fantastic to see so many responses. Let's get to know a little bit about you in your role as an elder. And they're still coming through. When we finish the presentation, I'll share the presentation and the responses with Justin, and he can post them up somewhere online and you can look through these as well. So now I can't see anybody on the screen. So Justin, if I do need to stop and pause, just speak up and interrupt me if I'm missing anything on the chat. At the moment, I can only see my screen. Thanks for that, Justin, and some of the other co-hosts as well. Let's look at the next question. How long have you been an elder or a leader? I put leader there because some churches use maybe a different title for that senior local church leadership role. Maybe you haven't started, maybe you've been in the role for a year or so, 2 to 4 years, 5 to 10 years. Maybe some of you are heritage listed in how long you've been elders. Let's just get a bit of a sense for the average experience of our elders that are connected here this morning. And for those that can't see the screen, we've got quite a few who've been in this role for 5 to 10 years, a few 2 to 4 years, and we've got 8 who are heritage listed, and well done to you 9 that have been doing this for a long time. So the things we're probably going to explore this morning are not new to some of you who are heritage listed, more than 10 years. To some of you, they may be new, and to others, there may be a few things that are new as well. So great to see that the majority of our elders here have had at least 2 years of experience, with many of you having more experience. And wonderful that you've taken on this role and that you've continued throughout this role for quite some time as you've served in your local churches. Let's have a look at another question to get a little bit of feedback as to where you're from. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident, equipped, and prepared do you feel in your role as an elder? Are you sailing to Tarsus with Jonah? That's definitely not confident. Or is elder your middle name? That's, I've been doing this for such a long time. I feel really good in this role. And you can use the slider there on whatever device to move it up and down. Between 0, you're on a ship, sailing towards Tarsus, experiencing some turbulence, preparing for an encounter with a big fish. Or you've been doing this for such a long time that elder has become synonymous with your middle name. And great to see, the average there is around 6.8, 6.7. So overall, that's really good to see. And you can see a little bit of a spread there, that the majority of us are feeling somewhere in the middle towards experienced, which is great. And I hope that what we do this morning will add to that experience, enhance what it means to be an elder, and perhaps look at the role of an elder from a slightly different perspective that can contribute to what you have already been doing over many years. And this is great because this is the group that we are talking to this morning. Those who have had a little bit of experience, those who do have an idea about the role, and those who are not starting from absolute scratch and we need to start to go back to a dictionary definition. So let's go to that next question. Now this is something you can type in. There's no right or wrong. But as you think of an elder, we know that in the Bible, in the New Testament, there were some who were paid for their ministry role, and there were some who were not paid. We would probably say they were volunteers. What would you see as some of the key differences between a paid minister, someone who earns a living from working with a local church or in the local church or in ministry, and someone who volunteers as a local elder who's not receiving a paycheck? Okay, so there's expectations are different, yes. Someone has just said we have the same responsibility. Perhaps the paid person could be more focused, the degree of passion difference, time and expectation. I like this one, paid minister is the evangelist. Someone says there is no difference. Formal qualifications, commitment level, yeah, commitment's coming through. The time availability is coming through a few times. Let's scroll down. From a spiritual context, there is no difference between a paid minister and volunteer elder. Now, responsibilities are different. More time for ministry, responsibility is higher with the paid minister as well as being the shepherd. Now, if you notice, I chose the word minister instead of pastor, and there's a very real reason for that we'll explore over the next few minutes as well. A few people saying there isn't a difference, and some are saying it's quite similar. Well, this is an interesting one. The paid person is sometimes governed by what they can say or preach. I like that. You can say more if you're not paid because you can't get in trouble for it. And again, there's this recurring theme that there's quite a lot of similarity and probably not too much of a difference between a paid minister and a volunteer elder. Okay, paid to have more time to serve. Let's go to our next question there. And again, if you're just joining us, I can't see you as there are so many people on the screen, but if you do want to participate, go to menti.com up here on the screen, the website www.menti.com, and use the code there to join in and to be able to participate. Here's one: different expectations and higher expectations for paid ministers. Yeah, there's validity in all these responses. There are similarities, there are some differences, whether artificial or otherwise, and perhaps in the Bible there were some differences we'll explore in just a minute. Now, as you read through, especially the book of Acts, but through other parts of the New Testament, I want to encourage and challenge you with a difference, a key difference between a paid minister and a volunteer elder. And because our time is limited, we're not going to do an in-depth, exhaustive Bible study, but I would encourage you to go back and read through, explore some of these things in your own time so that you follow in the footsteps of the Bereans, rather than just taking what you said. You go back, you study, you research it, and you explore it through the Bible. If you follow through the New Testament, those who received a wage or who received financial support from the local church were usually what we would categorize more as apostles. So the paid ministers in the New Testament were more apostles who did spend some time in local churches, but most of their focus was going from church to church, either to support, to empower, to develop, or to start new churches. So the paid ministers were often involved in beginning the work in new places, in introducing the gospel to those who hadn't heard it before, in establishing small groups, church plants for a more modern contemporary delineation, whereas the local volunteer elders, they were the ones that stayed behind. When Paul writes to Titus, he says to Titus, I've left you behind so that you can appoint elders. Elders in all of the little groups or companies or churches that were established. So that was a key difference. The local elders, the presbyters, the episkopos, as you have some Greek words in the New Testament, they were the ones that generally stayed local. They were the volunteers who remained with a local group. However, the apostles or the paid ministers, they were the ones that traveled and broke new ground, opened the gospel mission in different places. Let's go to Acts. Well, we'll come back to that in a minute, actually. This is a ranking question. What would you see in terms of that local elder, the primary role? And you can start to select in terms of ranking. It's not right or wrong, but how would you prioritize these? Is it to serve, to model, to lead, to organize, or to empower? And what you can do is you can click on the first tab there. You can select one of those 5 different options. And then what that will let you do is it'll start to organize these in different orders. So this isn't in any order. These are random. What would you see as the ranked priority of these different ones? Is it to serve, to lead, to empower, to model, or to organize? What would you see as the primary role of an elder? And it's great to see some responses there. Now, these are things that all of us as elders have done. These are things that we've often done, whether we've been in a leadership role officially or otherwise. But in terms of an elder, what would you see as a key or a primary role for that? And at the moment, serve is coming up on top, followed closely by lead and empower. 4th is model, and 5th is to organize. But that concept of service or serving is coming up strong. To serve, to lead, to empower in that particular order. So really good to get some of that feedback. We've just switched there. It's really close, second and third tied between empower and lead, but serve is still on top. And I guess it depends on how we define those words, especially to serve and to lead. To empower is to help and encourage and involve others. But what does it actually mean to serve? Sometimes when we think of elders, we think an elder does the work of ministry. If it needs to be done, an elder can do it, will do it, should do it. Empower is someone who involves. The lead is someone who gets up the front and says, let's go, follow me. And model is someone who is an example. So really good to see so many responses there. As always, if you've just joined, menti.com up the top and you've got the code there as well. We're just going to look at one key Bible passage in the book of Acts, Acts chapter 20 and verse 28 in the New Testament there. Now, Paul, who probably was the greatest evangelist second to Jesus in the New Testament, and the one who led the work to the Gentiles, is speaking to elders. And in verse 28, he gives a very basic overview of the role of an elder. And I'm just reading from Acts chapter 20, verse 28. This is a talk that is given to elders. Keep watch over yourselves and all the flock of which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers. So the word he uses is an overseer. Be shepherds of the church of God, which he bought with his own blood. Now, the term pastor sometimes comes from that concept of shepherding. But Paul, and as you read through the New Testament, and again, I'd encourage you to do that in your own time, the concept of a shepherd, an elder, a presbyter, an episkopos in the Greek, they were one and the same. And the term we use today for pastor probably is a bit of a misnomer, because the term pastor and elder and a presbyter are all one and the same in the New Testament. At the end of the day, when we think of a pastor or an elder or a shepherd, it was someone who was there local to oversee the flock. It's imagery from sheep, from being a shepherd, someone who cares for, provides for, nurtures, and helps sheep grow and thrive, basically. So that's the concept that Paul shares. And again, biblically, those who received a wage from ministry were those who went from place to place and broke new ground. Whereas those who weren't paid in ministry, the volunteers, the elders, the shepherds, the pastors, they were the ones that were local and basically were responsible for complete oversight of the local church. Now, I'm not sure, as I've shared that, if the cogs are turning and you're starting to think, well, where are we at today as an Adventist church in Australia? And I'd say probably, I mean, there's not enough time to explore the history, but we've probably wandered a little bit from that, where the concept of a paid minister today is someone who stays local and the elders support that paid minister. Whereas biblically, the paid minister traveled, started new churches, went to new places, did new innovative ministries and outreach and evangelism, while the volunteers cared for the local church. If you're interested in knowing more a little bit about that, I will share a resource with Pastor Justin that he can put up and share somewhere that provides a bit of a history of the early church as well as the Adventist church, because we didn't have paid ministers for a very long time. And when we did have paid ministers, they were the ones that traveled from place to place and started new churches. And it was only around the 1920s, 1930s, where we started to transition and follow in the footsteps of other churches where paid ministers stayed local. And what's fascinating in that journey is that when paid ministers did start to become more localized, you actually see a correlation in a slowdown in church growth. We see that in America, we see that in Australia, we see that throughout the world. So when paid ministers are out in the community, in new places, starting new churches, we see significant church growth. When paid ministers stay local, we start to see a decrease. We're still growing, but much, much slower than what we did when our ministers were starting new churches and probably following a little bit more of a Book of Acts model towards that. I want to share just one passage from a favorite author of mine, see if you can pick the name there, and look at what she says about the role of an elder. The elders should arrange matters so that every member of the church shall have a part to act, that none may lead an aimless life, but that all may accomplish what they can according to their several ability. Now, that's quite an interesting way of looking at the role of a local church elder, and she explains what it means to oversee what she's doing. And if, in case you haven't guessed, Gould Harmon is better known by a more common name, Ellen White. I just put that there to make sure that we're all awake. What Ellen White says here is that what Paul says to the elders in Acts and what he writes through other letters about overseeing, about shepherding, involves this aspect. If you think of a shepherd doesn't hold sheep in his arms and basically forces food down their mouth, grass, clover, whatever it is. What a shepherd does is he leads the sheep to a place where they can drink, they can grow, they can eat, they can multiply. If they're struggling, he helps them, he protects them, he keeps them safe, but he facilitates a process for them to be involved in their own journey. And here Ellen White says that an elder's primary role and task is not to do all the work, but to empower, to lead, to facilitate, and to involve others in ministry. Ministry in the local church, caring for each other, ministry in supporting new people who come, discipling, caring for, and ministry in terms of mission. Because both in terms of the Bible and in terms of the spirit of prophecy and our Adventist history and heritage, the local pastor was off starting a new church, planting new churches, writing books, doing media. I mean, we were at the forefront of media and technology. We had printing presses when only very large corporations did. We were doing remarkable things and innovative things to reach new people. And so while the ministers are off doing new ministry work, the local elders are the ones that are involving local churches to continue to do mission, to reach new people, to care for new people, and to care for each other as well. Now, in terms of providing that sort of leadership, I've got a few very simple basic principles to reflect on as elders and as leaders. And I call this the 3 Ps of ministry leadership. Leadership, and we'll come to that slide in a minute, leadership is defined, and I like this definition, a leader knows what needs to be done and gets others to do it. And that's an area that we probably don't focus on enough. You think of any enterprise, any activity, if you don't have someone to lead, not much gets done or there is confusion. And the role of an elder is to know and understand what needs to be done and to involve others in doing that, in getting that done. If we see our role as elders primarily to do the work of ministry, to do the work of the local church, to be the ones that serve, that organize, that preach, that teach, that is a very quick path towards burnout. Now, some of you have been in the church a lot longer than I have. Some of you have been in your roles a lot longer than I have. I've only been doing this for, what would it be now? 15, 16, 17 years, somewhere there. But I see this ongoing cycle where we have people who want to do, who are very active and very excited about doing, and we get them to do, and they last for a year, 2, 3, and then they get tired, they burn out, and then we find somebody else to do it. Or if there's no one else to do it, we just settle down into this sort of go slow mode where we do the bare minimum to keep the doors open and to get this week's program done. Next week's another week, and we'll put in another mammoth effort to open the doors and get through the Sabbath school and through the sermon. And that's probably because of our approach where those who have leadership gifts, instead of asking them to lead or training or equipping or involving them to lead and engage others, we expect them to do all of the work. And that happens to pastors, and it happens to elders just as much. And I can't see your faces, but I'm sure that some of you can relate to that. And you've been on that journey, and you may even today be feeling a little bit tired because you've done so much and you feel like you're the only one doing it. And this is something where we as a church need to work on slowly shifting culture, that the reason you're appointed as an elder is because you have done, is because you have been active, you have served, You have done all those basic ministry tasks, and now we recognize you can lead others to do that, not being the one that does it all and burns out, and in 2 years' time, you take a back seat for a few years just to catch your breath and rest. Now, a few basic concepts in ministry leadership for elders. And as I said, I will share these with Justin, and so he can pass these on to you afterwards. The 3 P's of ministry leadership. How do we approach being an elder? What are some of the high-level concepts of working through this? And then we're going to start high level and drill down. The first thing is prayer. If you don't have time and are not praying as an elder, then we're not functioning in what we've been called to do. And I would encourage you to stop everything else and spend some time in prayer. If you were too busy organizing rosters and organizing people and doing the Sabbath school lesson, and you don't have time to pray for your members, for the people entrusted to your care, for those in the community that you're trying to reach, then we really have to ask ourselves what we're doing. We may be on a treadmill that leads to nowhere. We're running, we're huffing, we're puffing, but we're not making progress. And so I'd want you to reflect in your own life as an elder in your local church. Is this the first thing that you think of in your role as an elder? And if it's not, why not? And is there anything more important than this? We must remember that in our work, we are spiritual leaders first and foremost. And to lead spiritually, to support spiritually, we must be praying for our people. Don't pray for the program, don't pray for the building, don't pray for abstract things, pray for people by name. Simple, short, you can do that when you're eating, you can do that when you're driving, you can do that just before you fall asleep, you can do that in dedicated time in your morning devotions. But don't feel that if you only got through so much in your morning devotions, that's the end of prayer. You can do it anytime, pray for people. Now, if you haven't done this, everything else is not as significant and it often falls over. When we pray, God can do things that we cannot otherwise do. If we don't pray, we will burn out. We will not know the best way to lead. There is tension, there is conflict, exasperation, frustration. The next one is people. Have you noticed when we appoint people to leadership roles, pastors and elders, deacons, today we're talking about elders, an early thing that we do in their journey is we may give them a manual or a job description. And it's here are all the things that you need to do. Service, rosters, visitation, all sorts of other things. Those things, I think, come a little bit later. I would say that the first aspect, or the second aspect after prayer of being an elder in the local church, is to know and to love people, to build relationships. Now, if you've been appointed as an elder, and in your term as an elder, you do nothing but pray for people in your church and love them, spend time with them, get to know them, and form friendships, you have done an incredible and marvelous job. Because if we look at the Bible, the very concept of salvation is the restoration of relationships. The Bible says, or Jesus told us, that the greatest commandments are to love God and love others. The Bible in Matthew, it tells us that Jesus came to save us from sin. What is sin? Breaking the law. What is the law? Well, Jesus said the law is loving God and loving others. So relationships are at the core of salvation. To be saved from sin is to be saved and restored from broken relationships with God and broken relationships with others. And so if you never do a roster, if you never preach a sermon, if you never organize a program, if you never fix a building, if you never do announcements at the front of church, but you build relationships with people, you are doing an incredible and marvelous job as an elder. And find simple ways to build relationships. It doesn't have to be budgeted. It doesn't have to be highly structured or organized. Conversations, talk, chat, meals, socials, all ways that can be enjoyable to build relationships with those around us. So prayer, people, and then the final one is process. Let's look at some simple structures and simple steps in actually leading, empowering others, the way both Paul encourages us to, and the way Ellen White says our role is to involve others in the ministry and mission of the local church. Sometimes we skip to process first. How do we do it? What are the steps? What's 1, 2, 3, 4 to make things happen? I would say if that's where you're functioning at the moment, ask yourself, am I praying for people? Am I spending time loving people and getting to know people? And if I haven't had time for those things, then slow down, skip the process. And COVID has taught us this. We've lost our buildings and we've lost our programs, and yet we can still have relationships. We can still pray for people. So process is third on the list: prayer, people, process. If you don't have time for people because you're busy running a process or a program or serving a building, then I think we've missed our calling, because we can pay event managers to run programs. In fact, if you find a really cluey software engineer, he could probably design some artificial intelligence process to create good programs and to roster people and to schedule people and send automated processes to get people to do stuff per se. People, prayer, then process. Process last. So let's have a look at a few processes for elder leadership, some things that we can do once we've prayed for people, once we've taken time to build relationships. Then what are the next steps? Let's have a look at some key aspects of leading as an elder. The first one I would say is visitation, and this very much links into the people before. And by visitation, I don't necessarily mean a half an hour schedule at someone's home. That's a great way to do it, but it's not the only way. It's spending time intentionally with people. It can happen in their homes. It can happen at a cafe. It can happen in the park. It can happen in the church foyer. Visitation is when you go beyond, hi, how are you? How was your week? A lot of us do that at church. Visitation is a lot more intentional to really get to know and understand a person. I will share something with Pastor Justin that he can share or put up, and he may have his own, and I'd encourage you to do your own. I've got a list of about 60, 70 questions that you can ask to have better conversations with people to get to know somebody. There is a website, TAOSC, the Art of Conversation, TAOC.com, and that has some conversation cards on questions you can ask to get to know people. Sometimes we're not that confident in getting to know people, so ask someone, hey, what questions do you ask? And you'll find plenty of lists out there. I've got some specifically done for elders that I can share, but it's a progressive list of getting to know people. Spending time with people is key. If your main focus is the church program, then perhaps we've missed what that calling is. And I would say, you know who should be running church programs? You know who should be up the front? You know who should be the visibility and the face of the local church? Pick your children and pick your young people. By the time you're my age, we should already be taking a back seat and really letting them do some of the visible, up the front, FaceTime things. We can definitely do that while we focus on developing people in our local churches. And we might say, well, their sermon might be off, or they don't know how to do it. Especially if they don't know how to do it, is all the more reason to involve our very young, to be involved in managing, running, and developing initiatives and programs at the local church. I was about 12 when I decided that I was bored of church. And I came home one Sabbath after church, and over lunch I said to my father, I don't want to go to church anymore. And he said, why not? And you can imagine what I said, because church is boring. He said, okay, what part of it is boring? And I said, well, all of it. He said, all of it? He said, do you like Sabbath school? I said, yeah, well, Sabbath school is good because I have fun with my friends and there's a quiz and there's prizes for the quiz. I like that. Okay, so Sabbath school's okay. What about Pathfinders? No, Pathfinders is fine. And what about socials? Oh, the games are fantastic. Okay, so Pathfinders, socials, and Sabbath schools are fine. The singing? Oh, I don't mind the singing. It's okay. That's okay. The sermon? Yeah, the sermon's boring. So my dad said, so you're not saying church is boring. You're saying everything is okay except for the sermon. The sermon is boring. I said, yeah, that about sums it up. The sermon's boring. So while I'm there, he picks up the phone and he rings up the pastor. And he says, Pastor, do you have any free preaching dates anytime soon? Pastor says, yeah, I've got something in 3 months. And he says, great, Christian's preaching that date. And I preached my first sermon at 12. And it was probably shocking. I don't remember it, and I'm glad nobody else does. But that really engaged and encouraged and involved me in preaching. And you know what? Those members were very patient. They were very gracious. They gave me that opportunity that allowed me to continue to learn and grow. After all, they'd heard hundreds of sermons. They could put up with a bad one every now and again. from one of our young people. They were affirming, they were encouraging. So that was a bit of an aside, but this is probably more of a focus of what we as elders can do. So visitation is spending intentional time to get to know people. Comprehension is using that time to understand where they're at. Where are people at in their journey? If I ask you of the church members that you are responsible, that you're caring for, what's their testimony? What led them to come to Jesus? What is their family life like? And we might say that's getting a little bit personal. We're family. If we are not family in church, what hope do we have? The world is lonely. It's the greatest need in society, loneliness. And we have an opportunity to build community. Now, I might not ask someone on a visit, on my first visit, how's your marriage? But maybe by the second, by the third, by the fourth, as I'm building a relationship, there should be a point in time where I've developed a relationship where I can say, hey, how are things going between you and your spouse? How's your parenting going? Tell me a little bit about your morning devotions. What are you enjoying doing in spending time with Jesus each day? Oh, I'm not. Okay, that's all right. No judgment. I'm here to understand where you're at so I can encourage you and build you up, so I can strengthen you in your own life and strengthen you as you minister to others. Our members cannot minister to others if they're struggling themselves. If they're struggling, let's discover what they're struggling with. And then you might not share the specific details with other elders or the pastor, but you might say some of our members are struggling with morning devotions. Why don't we spend some time going on a journey, learning how to have better time with Jesus each morning? What if I spend some time with you one-on-one and we're going to do morning devotions together for a month? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 2 minutes, but we're going to model and I'm going to take you on a journey to do morning devotions. What about family worship? How many of our families do family worship? And do you know? Do I know? If our families aren't doing worship together and they come to church for a program, what impact are we going to have in our community? If our families aren't praying together, aren't spending time enjoying God's presence as a family aside from church together? Maybe someone's struggling financially. We don't know that unless we spend time with them. What are you doing for Jesus? What are you gifted for? What do you enjoy doing in mission? Oh, nothing. That's okay. At least I know that you're not involved or that you're struggling, or maybe that you do have giftedness in mission. So visitation is key to build relationships. Comprehension is an opportunity to really understand where our people are at. If you don't have time to do too many things, this is more important than organizing a program. And if you have a small church and you're so busy organizing a program on Sabbath that you don't have time to do this, I would encourage you to stop doing a program on Sabbath and use Sabbath time to get to know each other, to socialize, to visit. We've done programs till the cows come home, but sometimes our relationships are struggling. They're not there. So instead of saying we're going to do more of a program this Sabbath, let's say, hey, let's get to know each other this Sabbath. This Sabbath, we're going to interview this person. This Sabbath, we're going to spend time together in families, in homes, or on Zoom to really understand our spiritual journey, our family journey. Tell me a little bit about your workplace. What opportunities for ministry are there? And there are plenty of questions we can ask. I do have these all available in the Word document. My encouragement is to work with your local eldership team, your pastor, to develop your own questions as well. There's no right or wrong. But let's build a bank of questions that help us get to know and comprehend people's personal and faith journey. The next one is activation. Remember what Ellen White says, the role of an elder is to involve people in mission. Now that we know where people are at, how can we involve them? What can we ask them to do? And I'd suggest that saying to someone, well, go find someone to give a Bible study to is probably a step too far. Most of our members aren't ready to do that. They don't know how. So let's not give people difficult things to do, but what are some small things that you can do? I'll give you one example of how I've activated some members. And this is just one of literally thousands of things that you can do based on the person, based on who they are, what they can do, how much time they have. I've had some members who come to church year in, year out and have never contributed to the ministry of the church. So I said to them, hey, I need your help. On Sabbath when you come, I don't have time to know exactly who's at church. So I've got 5 names on a list for you. All I need you to do is message me if any of these people aren't here at church. You just have a look for them. Now that's a simple thing that someone can do. All of a sudden, I've gone from someone who sits on a pew to someone who actually looks around to see if there's anybody missing, and feeds that name on to me or to another elder. Simple things like that to engage people in caring for others in ministry. I could never go door knocking. Door knocking is a step way too far for many of our members. Okay, could you pray for somebody? Now, I, as a pastor or an elder, am visiting this particular person. Can you please pray for them when I visit them? Can you pray with me? Can you once a week give me a call and pray with me or pray with somebody else? Much easier than door knocking. Simple steps to involve people in mission. Think of very easy things, but do, as an elder, look for opportunities to get people to do something. It might be mission, it might be, could you please do the welcome or the announcements or the worship, depending on what capacity they have. Instead of us as elders being at the front, coming up with ideas, let's give them opportunities. Hey, you know what? We've got a personal ministries meeting coming up. We're talking about evangelism. I'd love to hear some ideas from you. Can you just think of some ideas? Not things that you necessarily are committing to do, but come up with some ideas by next week and send me a list. Little things. Okay, this week I want you to go and make a new friend in the community. Well, that's really hard. Okay, I'm going to give it to you really simple. I want you to go to the local pub, order an orange juice and sit next to somebody and get to know their name. Can you do that? That's it for this week. Simple things to engage and to be in our community. Affirmation, when they do those simple things, encourage them. Be a Barnabas. Thank them for that. Give them a sense that what they're doing is valuable and meaningful. And the final one, elevation. Keep increasing the responsibility and the opportunity that you're giving people. Elevate. Today, you're looking out to see who's missing and you're sending me a message. Do that for 3 months. In 3 months, I'm going to invite you over for a meal and I'm going to invite one of the 5 people on the list so you get to know them. Once you've built a friendship in 6 months, when they're missing, I want you not to send me a text message. I want you to send them a text message to say, hey, we missed you at church on Sabbath. Really simple, slow. I mean, you could go through a lot quicker if you have the capacity, but if you don't, and our members are a bit wary or tired or time poor, then find ways to engage them in a really simple way and build a culture of engagement. 3 S's of activation. I'm going to go through these really quickly. Keep it really simple. When you get people involved, the simpler the better. And if people aren't doing the things that you're inviting them to do or delegating them to do, then keep in mind, it's probably not simple enough. It's a step too far. And instead of saying people are lazy or indifferent or not interested, they just don't want to serve, think, how can I give them something even simpler to do, even simpler? The moment you start to build momentum with really simple things, people will start to engage and realize, hey, I can do something simple. I can do something a little bit more challenging, a little bit harder, and we build progression. The same way we do it in school. We don't ask kids to know how to do calculus or read the encyclopedia. We start with sounds, with noises, and then we move to letters, and then we move to words and sentences. Let's do that as we activate. Sustainable. Don't ask people to do something that they can't do for very long. Don't burn people out. It has to be not just simple, but something they can do again and again and again. Now, this week, I want you to give 10 Bible studies. Here are 10 people that I have, and I'm going to pass 10 Bible studies on to you. Well, that's a quick way to burn someone out instantly. Sustainable. Simple, sustainable. If there are more things to do, share the load. And finally, satisfying. Find something that people do enjoy doing. If you're asking people to do things that are too hard or that are outside of their complete comfort zone, it sounds good. Do something outside of your comfort zone. Yeah, that sounds really good. And we keep telling people to do something outside of their comfort zone, and they don't do it because it's so far outside of their comfort zone. So find something that people can enjoy doing as well. Ministry is not supposed to be something that we dread, something miserable, something so hard that as soon as we've done it, it's like, phew, don't have to do that for another week. It's supposed to be something enjoyable, something that brings satisfaction. So the simpler, the more sustainable, the more satisfying it is. And use these 3 principles to talk with other elders at your local church, other elders in other churches, with pastors. What are some of the things we can do to engage people in some simple, sustainable, satisfying ministry and mission opportunities? Now, I've got one more thing for you to rank. Have a look here and think, what is a way not just to do some things yourself, but to involve and to train, to disciple, to mentor others? There are 5 steps there. They're in random order at the moment. What do you think a more effective order would be? The first random one is there. I do, you help, we talk. The second is you do, someone else watches. The third is you do, I watch, we talk, or I do, you watch, we talk, you do, I help, we talk. You can see them on the screen. What would be a more effective order to put these in? Because remember, our role is to involve people. Now, if you've asked somebody to do something and they feel they can't even do something really simple like praying, say, what if we do it together? Okay, I don't know who's missing. Okay, every week I'll sit next to you and together we look out for names of people that are missing. I'll highlight the names and faces so that you know who they are. If we're struggling and people aren't willing to take things on, take them with you. Get them to come. If you're doing visitation, I'd encourage you, especially as you gain a bit of traction, not to do it on your own. Who else will you teach? Who else will you involve? If you have a church with 100 people and there's 3 elders, it's going to be hard for you to visit all those. So start to involve and teach other members to do it. I think you've all pretty much done this very well. So the first thing is I do, you watch, and then we talk about it. This is how we engage and involve others in ministry. And as an elder, have a think about this one thing. Is what I'm doing something I can involve someone else right now? If I can, who will I involve? If I can't involve somebody else, then it might not be what I should be doing in my role. I do, you watch. That's the first step. The second one is, okay, now you've seen me do a visit. You've seen me pray. You've seen me make a new friend at the pub. You're too shy to go to the pub and make a new friend? Come with me to the pub and I'll show you how to get somebody's name. We want to do door knocking, you're too timid? That's okay, come with me. You do, or I do, you watch. Then I do, and what do? I do, and you help. You start to participate. Maybe you'll ask a few questions. Maybe you'll share a few things. Maybe I pray and then you pray, and then we talk about it. What was that like? What did you learn? How did you feel? What's the next one? The next one is you do, I pass it over to you, and I help. I'm your assistant. I'm here to hold your hand if something goes wrong. I'm here to participate with you. The fourth step is you do, and I watch. I just take a step back. I'm not involved. Tonight, you're doing it yourself. This visit, this pub, I'm going to sit there and drink my orange juice, but I'm just going to be at a distance and watch how you do it so that we can talk and debrief. And finally, the process repeats itself. You do, and you take someone else with you. So keep in mind, if your role as an elder is to do everything, this is irrelevant. But biblically and from the spirit of prophecy, our roles as elders is to empower, to involve, to engage others in ministry. You've already done ministry. You've already done sermons. You've already preached. You've already done Sabbath schools. You've already done basic ministry tasks, which is why you've been appointed as an elder. Now that you are an elder, your role is to take it to the next step and involve and engage others in small, simple ministry tasks. The last concept, and I'm quoting myself here, I'm sure others have said it before me, I just couldn't find anybody that I could quote quickly, but elders are called to lead people, not programs. Often when we think of eldership, we think of someone who runs the worship team, who runs the church service, who runs the personal ministry department. And we often think of eldership as someone associated with the running of church programs, of church functions. Anybody can run church programs. And if you don't have people who can run church programs because they don't know how, praise the Lord. Get them to do it. I like what one of my pastors keeps saying, help people fail forward. Today was a disaster, tomorrow it will be better. This sermon was a flop, but that's okay, because I come to church not to hear the best sermon in the world. If you want to hear the best sermon in the world, can I recommend YouTube? Because you can hear Doug Batchelor and Mark Finley, you can hear me on there, you can hear Justin on there, you can hear Andrew on there, you can hear any world-class pastor, and I'm not including myself there, but you can hear world-class pastors preaching sermons on YouTube. The purpose of church is to be a community that enjoys being each other, that builds relationships and builds each other up. And you know what? If there's 100 of us in church and a young person who hasn't preached, what if all of us bit the bullet, 99 of us, and said, we are going to put up with a really bad sermon this week. I'll go listen to a good one on YouTube after church, but I want this young person to preach. We're going to see a disaster of a rostered and organized worship program where things are falling apart and nobody knows what they're doing, but it's the young people that are organizing it because that's how they'll learn. And I can put up with that because I'm not here at church for a show. I'm not here for entertainment. I can get that on television. I'm here to build relationships and to build each other up. And when I see a young person or a new person to the faith up the front doing their best and struggling and making a disaster of it, afterwards I can go up to them and say, that was awesome. You did a great job for your first time, and find some things to enjoy and to appreciate. And that's our role as leaders, not to be the ones doing it because we can do it better. Of course we can do it better. That's why we're elders. That's why we're pastors. And now that we've done it and we've learned, we can empower and encourage others. And you know who you empower and encourage? The ones who can't do it, the ones who haven't done it, the ones who don't know how to do it. What about if you have visitors that come to church? If we've developed a culture of building and developing others, you can explain to your leaders, we're not here for you, to your visitors. Our church is an entertainment on Sabbath and it's not a show. We're here to build people up. See Jim over there, he's 12. That's his first sermon. And it may not be great. Come over for lunch and we can talk theology over lunch. We're here to support him as he preaches, as he teaches, as he does a Sabbath school lesson, as he learns to organize a program. What kind of message will that send to our visitors about the culture we have in our church? It will send a message that we're here for people, not for programs. And as leaders, as elders, you are called to lead people, not programs. That's it in a nutshell from me. Now I'm going to exit this slide. You won't be able to see it quite the same way, just so I can start to see some of you here. If you do have some questions, type them in there. You're welcome to speak up as well. Raise your hand and share directly as well.